Why has classical education disappeared, and why do we live in a world that seems to celebrate nothingness and nihilism and the disappearance of meaning? This question was actually posed to me by a commenter, Explosive Twist, and I'm going to attempt to answer it. I'm here with the Owl of Minerva, who is beaming wisdom into me as we speak. But let's think about that. Why has classical education disappeared, and why do we live in a world in which people believe in nothing, to use his phrase? And I think it's a phrase that's very illuminating, because it's not why do people no longer believe in something, but why do they believe in nothing? That we have a belief in sort of absence, a belief in nothing itself, as if nothing is a virtue, and we'll get on to that. Well, I think we can begin at the beginning, though it would be a very long video, but we can go back to Socrates, the first sort of rational thinker, or first rational philosopher. And Socrates differed from philosophers before him who were more like magicians and are regarded as magicians very often. The pre-Socratics in ancient Greece, Thales, Heraclitus, etc., Empedocles, were concerned with what the world is made of, what are the forces underlying existence itself, something that I've spoken about. And they came up with some novel answers. Thales thought everything was made of water, Heraclitus thought everything was made of fire, and Empedocles, around 2,400 years ago, claimed that everything came from the four roots of earth, air, fire, and water, an idea that lives on in ceremonial magic and neo-paganism today, although they don't often know where this philosophy comes from. And in fact, kind of curiously, even in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, they use Hindu or Eastern symbols for the four elements. Without going off too much of a tangent, that's probably because the Platonic elements were classically taught in the Royal Arch degree of Freemasonry, which the founders of the Golden Dawn would have taken, and they probably did not want to break any oaths. We know how deadly that can be. Well, so Socrates did something new. Rather than wondering if the world was made of water or fire or air or whatever it may be, Socrates suggested that we can know the truth by asking questions through dialectical reasoning. And so there is a shift from belief in the metaphysical, the supernatural, underlying forces, as it were, the gods even perhaps, to believing that human consciousness can kind of solve all the riddles of existence. And it should be said that Socrates, of course, was accused of trying to pervert Greek society, and he was also, we might say, incredibly ugly. And I don't think that those two things are differentiated or can be entirely removed from each other. It's probably the case that Socrates did want to have a little bit of revenge on society. Although men are not typically judged solely by their looks, it is one way that we are looked, nevertheless, the one way that we are judged, nevertheless, and it's quite plausible that Socrates did indeed want to take revenge in some way. But let's fast forward to our modern world, because a lot of things have intervened in that time, and a lot of things have happened. And well, if we fast forward to the 18th century, of course, you get the French Revolution and the sort of tearing down of monarchy and of religion. And obviously this leads us further into a nihilistic state. In the Vendée region of France, hundreds of peasants were rounded up and tied together and drowned in the river at the same time to make way for progress and enlightened values, of course. Something that mass murder wouldn't normally bring about, but that is often a belief of such people. But of course we have the Industrial Revolution as well, which sends people from the countryside into the cities and disrupts and even destroys many traditional crafts or ways of life. But another important event, maybe the most important within the last couple of hundred years, is World War I, which introduced mechanized warfare and mass destruction with weapons such as mustard gas, and left many people who had volunteered. I think the youngest volunteer was 12 years old in that war. Left many, of course many men in particular, feeling betrayed. This was not a war of, two men against each other, sword in hand, all very noble and chivalrous. It was dropping gas from planes onto soldiers and launching missiles and using tanks. So suddenly war had a very different flavor to it, and was much more, in a sense, much more nihilistic. And of course the churches had encouraged young men to sign up to go and fight, as we might expect, but of course then there is disillusionment about your religion, or at least about the quote-unquote organized religion. It's the priests, etc., who told you to go and fight and suggested that it would all be very noble and chivalrous, and they didn't go and fight. So of course there is a lack of, or there is a decline in belief after this. Of course, many young women would never marry. That was at a time when marriage was actually very important, not least of all for one's survival. So of course it had an effect there as well. But then of course we have the 1960s with the introduction of female contraception, which turned sex into something very risky for women, getting pregnant very quickly. Hence, people got married very young a century ago, because pregnancy was unavoidable. But turned sex from something where you had to be very careful and think about your partner and their qualities into something that was casual and meaningless. So we have this world that is being stripped of its meaning, whether it's through quote-unquote rational thinking and the idea that we can just solve all of our problems through thinking about things rationally, which I think, as we know in our personal lives, is not really the case, or whether it's through mechanized warfare or the introduction of casual sex, which of course, then erodes traditional families, etc. You don't need that anymore. And so all of these things lead to the sort of erosion of a traditional society. But why do we live in this world of nihilism? So perhaps this is a good point to mention Georg Hegel, the German philosopher, and his philosophy. Now Hegel thought that the human consciousness, or maybe consciousness more broadly, the world spirit, was evolving and had evolved from ancient Greek society through various stages, including the quote-unquote revealed religion of Christianity, and that it had finally blossomed into, you guessed it, dialectical reasoning or rational philosophy, maybe the state apparatus of Prussia as well, but also, of course, implicitly Hegel's own philosophy. Now, it is often claimed today, because of one particular book, that Hegel, who influenced Marx, of course, and therefore has had a profound effect on the modern world, and it has been claimed, whether legitimately or not, that World War II was really a sort of conflict between right-wing and left-wing Hegelianism. But I'll leave that aside. It has been claimed, and often is claimed today, that Hegel was a Rosicrucian and a Freemason, or maybe a Freemason who became a Rosicrucian. Now, I would suggest, if you understand Hegel's philosophy, you would see that that is immediately total nonsense. And actually, Hegel is virulently anti-Rosicrucian, anti-Freemasonry, anti-esotericism, against symbolism even. I know that there has been a scrap of paper with a symbol drawn on it found in Hegel's documents. Well, I have to say, if you found all the scraps of paper I've ever written on, you'd have a totally different opinion, but that's because these things are throwaway. But what was Hegel really about? Because it is important to us, I think, this giant of the human mind and Western mind that has shaped the modern world. Well, Hegel, if you actually understand him, believes in this progress of the world spirit, of mind, consciousness, blossoming into this rational thinking, dialectical thinking, Hegelian thought itself, of course. And Rosicrucianism, Hermeticism, Freemasonry in particular, of course, were blossoming during his lifetime, late 18th century, early 19th century. And for Hegel, this is a kind of throwback, it shouldn't happen according to his philosophy, because we have progressed away from symbolism, we've progressed away from theatre, we've progressed away from religion, we've progressed away from mysteries, all of the things that the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons and the occultists and the alchemists were trying to revive, and had revived very significantly, of course. And for him, this really, in a sense, disproves his theory of this evolution of the consciousness evolving into rational thinking. Now, for us, what does it mean? How can we think about this? Why do these things bubble up again? That is a good question. I think Hegel was perhaps posing in his own way. Well, it is because we live increasingly in a world of meaninglessness and nothingness. And what is a ritual? What is, say, the Masonic ritual? Well, in the Masonic ritual, the candidate enters, they go through, from darkness into light, and they are shown these various symbols, or technically emblems, and they are things such as a hammer and chisel, a square and the compasses, building tools, architectural tools, and why? And these apparently have meaning. Well, implicit in that is the idea that the ordinary world is meaningful, that things in the ordinary world are or have some kind of transcendental value to them, that they are speaking about primordial truths, not even archetypal truths, but primordial truths that they in some way embody. Now, in the ordinary world, the ordinary world that we inhabit, nothing has any symbolic value. It may have significance in some respect, but no symbolic values. So, as we pass this cycle, for example, the cycle is a sign, in some sense, saying, ride me, I will take you somewhere. But it's not. It doesn't have symbolic value. It's not as if it's talking about the transcendent nature of cycling, or whatever it is, or cycles, or the cycles of time, or anything like that. So things have significance: road signs, signs on buildings, whatever, objects, just sort of announcing what their utility is. But it doesn't have a transcendent meaning. It doesn't point to the eternal, to the sacred, to things that are beyond this world and beyond our own life. Whereas ritual, of course, ritual immerses us in a world that is very unfamiliar to most people today, and that is a world in which every single thing has meaning, whether that is a builder's tool that has been placed on an altar or painted in a painting, or a word or gesture from the initiator, or whatever it may be, or the clothing, or whatever it is, but everything has meaning. And that is a world, the world of meaning is something that we left behind in the past. But it seems to me that it is also a world that we cannot escape if we want to remain fully human or fully alive. Well, it was said that when Sigurd the dragon slayer killed the dragon Fafnir, he was able to understand the language of the birds. And the birds here are telling me that we cannot live in a world of meaninglessness, even though it may be entertaining at times, but that we need to return to a world of meaning. Well, do check out angelmillar.com, and thanks very much. I'll see you again soon.